talk really loud.
Should it be on?
Yes.
Is there a sound system? I think that's.
Now I think I heard you.
No,
Okay, can you hear me?
no, not yet. He got you. He's on the wall.
Okay. Can you all hear me?
That's a little better.
Okay. Okay. I'll try and get close to it, and if you can't hear me, let me know, and I will talk loudly as well, or speak loudly as well. So, thank you all for being here this evening. I appreciate it very much. I'm State Auditor Nicole Galloway, and I'm here to present the results of the audit of the City of Harrisonville. Now, I'm joined here tonight by Audit Manager Todd Schuler and Senior Auditor Julie Molden, who are here. They both were involved in the preparation of this report and the audit work here within the city. I'd also like to recognize a few folks, Mayor Brian Hassick, Mayor Pro Tem David Dickerson, Alderwomen Judy Reese, Judy Bowman, and Marcia Milner, and Alderman Brad Bockelman, Matt Turner, Clint Long, and Josh Stratford. I appreciate the assistance that I received from officials within the city throughout the audit process. I'd also like to thank the city administrator, Happy Welch, and the finance director, Marcella McCoy, and other city staff and employees for their assistance throughout the audit process as well. I'd also like to recognize the chief petitioner, Virgil Butler, who requested the petition and collected 617 signatures required to start this audit process. Now, the residents here were engaged throughout the course of the audit. We received information to consider throughout the audit process, and we reviewed each item. Information that led to findings are included within the audit report. And, we are here tonight because the citizens here care greatly about their city and their government and how its operations impact fellow citizens. This audit is not just about pointing out problems, but it's also about identifying solutions that will help improve efficiency in the operations of city government. Now, as state auditor, it is my job to ensure that government is held accountable to the people it represents. Before serving as state auditor, I was treasurer in Boone County, and I worked in the private sector as an auditor, a certified fraud examiner, and a certified public accountant. In both my private and public sector experiences, I have seen the positive results that can come after an audit, and there is true accountability in the operations of government. Coming from local government, I know that it's important to have an efficient and responsive government as well. I have people in my office that are concerned about their roads or concerned about their public safety, and they're looking for local leaders for solutions and to build their trust in how local government operates on behalf of its people. Now, the audit we are reviewing tonight covers the period of January through December 2015 for the financial portion of the audit, and the work was conducted here by my staff in Harrisonville between January and June of 2016, and then again in August of 2016. The report gives the city an overall performance rating of poor and includes findings in 10 audit areas. Now, overall, my team found a city that has overextended itself and overcommitted on a number of special taxing districts and projects throughout the city. A lack of planning has led to inadequate funding and taxing districts layered on top of each other, boosting sales tax rates charged to people who live and shop within the area. Even with multiple sources of public dollars flowing in, these projects haven't managed to generate enough revenue to keep pace with the payments due, leaving taxpayers on the hook several times over. The city of Harrisonville is a prime example of the dangers of allowing taxing districts to proliferate unchecked. City officials must ensure proper planning and monitoring of projects that rely on public funding to prevent these situations where the city is sometimes double taxing citizens. Now, I've outlined a number of necessary steps to better protect citizens' resources and help city officials create stronger safeguards over their money. Now, many of these findings that are in this report are about a lack of checks and balances, a lack of planning, a lack of oversight. You want to make sure that you have the proper segregation of duties, checks and balances, so the risk of funds will be misused, lost, or not accounted for properly decreases when you have that proper oversight in place. The audit also found concerns with public records and violations of the Sunshine Law, as well as a lack of accountability over certain accounting procedures. Now, there's 10 audit findings in the report. We will not go through each finding in detail. I will describe basically the key findings that we have. The presentation will take about 15 minutes, and then we'll have opportunity for questions at the end to make sure that I address any questions that you all might have. I will say that as you're looking through the report, maybe later this evening or this week or at some further time, and you have questions about what's in the report, you can always contact my office. So we can hopefully address your questions in case something pops up that we don't cover this evening. So if you want to follow along with me a little bit, you can turn to page 4, and that's where we'll get started with covering items in the report. So the first audit area covers the Highway 71, 291, Partners in Progress Transportation Development District. Now, the city committed to a 2-phase, $24 million redevelopment project for improvements to the I-49 and Highway 291 interchange on the east side of the city. Phase 1 was completed last August with the cost shared between the state, local sales tax revenue generated through the creation of a transportation development district and bonds. The city did not plan for funding of phase 2, which includes the widening of Highway 291, and that is, as you know, already underway. So the city planned out phase 1, paid for it with several different sources of revenue, and that project is completed. Now we're talking about phase 2 of this project, and the city did not conduct a feasibility study, did not plan on how they were going to pay for phase 2 of the project. So that means that they intend to use $200,000 in general revenue and more than $1 million in restricted utility funds to help pay off the second phase of the project. Now, utility funds are restricted funds. They can only be used for their restricted purpose, which is in this case, utilities. So the operations of the utility, the funds that come into the utility can only go towards expenses related to the utility. So utility funds are restricted. I really want you to keep that in mind throughout the rest of this report, which means the city is only supposed to use that money for its intended purpose and not for other general city expenses, including road projects. The report also notes a potential conflicts of interest when a member of the Board of Aldermen failed to abstain from voting on an approval for a TDD, despite family ownership interest in one of the businesses located within the district. So the situation with development and special taxing districts is complicated a little more due to the city's use of tax increment financing, or TIF. Now, this we cover in detail on page 6 of the report. Financial management issues also plague 2 redevelopment and revitalization projects that depend on tax increment financing districts: the town center redevelopment area and the marketplace redevelopment area. The city issued a total of $30 million in tax increment financing and revenue notes and bonds. But development has not kept pace with expectations. And in both cases, the city has failed to generate enough revenue to make required principal and interest payments on that debt. For the town center redevelopment project, the city secured the debt on behalf of the developer, which means it's now the city's responsibility to pay off that debt if the economic development does not come forward to pay off that bond. And so now the city has to pay more than $1 million out of its general revenue fund to make up the shortfall. In this example with the town center redevelopment project, the developer is taking almost no risk because the city agreed to back a private project with additional public funds. When developers count on public dollars to back their private projects, It opens the door for a lack of accountability. And citizens are left paying the price when projects fail to generate the promised development and revenue. Now, it might be helpful here to take just a step back and explain what some of these items I'm talking about, what TDDs are and what TIFs are. So, TDDs are Transportation Development Districts, and they're designed to assist local communities with transportation projects that benefit the public good. The businesses within the taxing district charge an additional sales tax to customers to fund specific transportation-related projects. So TDDs, you charge additional sales tax to pay for transportation-related projects. Tax increment financing districts are economic development tools generally focused on areas of blight. Property taxes in a specific area are diverted for use as an incentive for new development. The hope is that this new development will generate additional property tax revenues that will assist in paying off the revitalization project. So it's called tax increment financing, TIF, because whatever that development is, that increment of additional economic activity can go towards paying off the development project in general. TIF funds can be spent on a wide variety of improvements, whereas TDD funds, remember, can only go towards transportation development related expenses. Now, my audit shows that the city doesn't adequately track the remaining debt on each of these projects' individual funding sources. In other words, the city doesn't track the TDD portion and the TIF portion of the debt for each one of these projects. And so this increases the risk that money coming in from TDD sales taxes will be used for inappropriate or unapproved purposes, non-transportation project related purposes. Now, I'm going to step away from the microphone for a second so I can kind of point to what we have here on this map to outline what I'm talking about here. So, as you can see, I'm going to step over here for a second. So, what you can see here is that there's these, all of these different taxing districts, right? And so, what we're talking about here in the interstage at 291. That is the project where phase 2 was poorly planned. And so there's a TDD here where they charge extra sales tax and they paid off phase 1 of the project. They have money for phase 1. But for phase 2, they don't have the money, and so they're borrowing it from the utility fund, right? About $1 million, okay? What we're talking about here in the town center TDD and TIF, you can see here that there's a TDD layered on top of a TIF. Here in the marketplace TIF and TDD, and in the town center town center TDD and TIF. In this particular instance, there was not enough economic development to pay off the bonds, and so about $1 million in general revenue is going to go pay off costs within this taxing district. So, if you live in this community, within this community and you're paying sales tax and you're paying general taxes to the city that goes into the general revenue fund, and you pay your utility bill, all of that money is in some ways spread across these to pay off these different development projects. So again, overlapping projects paired with a lack of tracking where the money is coming from and where it's going increases the risk that debt will be paid off in the incorrect order. We recommend that the city make sure that there are procedures in place to track the debt from the transportation districts and establish a separate fund to better monitor related funding and spending within these areas and get a better handle on the financial situation that is occurring within these taxing districts. With that, I'm going to turn to finding 3, which talks about utility services, which I touched on briefly, if you recall, and this begins on page 9. Now, I already discussed concerns with using restricted utility funds for other purposes. This is not allowed under the city's bond covenants as well. In addition, the city has no basis for how it determines the amount transferred from the electric fund to the general fund. In 2015, this totaled nearly $1 million. Because these transfers represent a significant revenue source, the city must evaluate the impact on the electrical fund and how depleting the electrical fund and transferring money over to the general fund affects customers' electric rates. The report also describes a situation from 2015 where the city settled a dispute with Cass County over a failed partnership related to the county's tri-generation project. Now, the county and the city plan to build a thermal and electrical generator and biogas power supply to provide power to the Cass County Justice Center and the city's wastewater treatment plant. The project, throughout the planning phase and up until almost the very end, was not discussed with the city board or the electric department prior to applying for a state grant related to the project. Now, this project was determined to violate the city's agreement with its electrical provider. And also, there was no written contract, which increases risk to the city for this particular project. And so the city had to pay thousands of dollars in the cancellation of this project. The city also needs to ensure it has more control over adjustments made to utility accounts. These adjustments are sometimes necessary in the event there's an error or an inaccurate billing or meter reading, or maybe there's a water leak. However, the city must have safeguards to ensure all adjustments are appropriate and to ensure there's a process in place to collect past due amounts on utility accounts. We found about $1.7 million in delinquent utility and emergency service accounts that were more than 5 years past due. Now, this is unfair to residents who pay their utility bills on time, plus such a high rate of unpaid utility bills could impact utility rates for all customers. The next area that we're going to cover is procurement procedures and contracts, and this is on finding 4, which begins on page 14. Now, the report raises concerns with the city's failure to follow purchasing policy and failure to solicit bids for almost $1 million in purchases, ranging from vehicles, to body cameras, to road oil, and catering services. Now, the bidding process is necessary to ensure that the city is getting the best deal for its citizens, right? You bid out your purchases to make sure you're getting the best market rate, the best deal, and so when they're spending your public dollars, when they're spending your tax dollars, that they're getting the best deal possible. And we found about $1 million in purchases for which there was not the appropriate bidding to make sure they were getting the best deal with your money. In addition, improvement is needed in the city's handling of change orders on projects. Now, you know, when you have a construction project, sometimes you have change orders because something happens within the project and you need to change the project a little bit, and sometimes that costs a little extra money. However, change orders are generally made on minor cost adjustments, and we found about $200,000 in change orders on just 2 projects. This indicates poor planning and could cause serious delays or budgeting issues when it comes to planning or paying off these projects in the long run. The next audit area is on the police construction project, which begins on page 18 of the report. We found that the city did not get an appraisal on the property, which it purchased for about $50,000 for the police station. Now, again, without an appraisal, it's difficult to know whether the city paid an appropriate amount. So you want to get an appraisal on the property so you know what you're paying is reasonable. The city also failed to retain all appropriate documentation from the planning phase of the construction on the new police station, including information related to civil engineering services. Additionally, bids, again, were not solicited for a variety of goods and services related to the police station, including furniture, phones, and landscaping. Now, moving on to allocations and restricted funds, this begins on page 20. And here we're going to talk about allocations on utility funds again. Now, the finance director uses several different calculations to split costs between various city funds, and some of the calculations are questionable. Payments made into some funds did not appear reasonable based on explanations provided. In addition, we recommend the city begins tracking the balance of various restricted revenues. So when you have allocations of money transferred from utility funds to the general fund, and some of it might be overhead costs or franchise fees or other different types of fees, we want to know that those are reasonable amounts that are being transferred, and that there's some documentation or support on why money is being taken out of those restricted utility funds and put into the general fund. Responsible financial management requires an accurate understanding of the current financial situation. Moving money in between funds from one fund to another results basically in a perpetual shell game that prevents city leaders from really getting an accurate assessment of city finances between all these different funds. In cases where the funds, again, are restricted, it is also inappropriate because restricted funds are designated for a specific purpose. Moving them to a new fund with a new label does not free up the money to be spent in ways other than it was originally intended. The final finding that I will cover tonight is finding 8, which is the Sunshine Law. Now this begins on page 27. And this is so important because the Sunshine Law is about allowing citizens to see how government operates. It's about inviting them to be part of the process, right? The Sunshine Law is the law that allows transparency or demands transparency within government. The report shows examples of times when the board went into a closed session for reasons which are not allowable under state law. The city's financial statements were not published as required. Again, citizens expect transparency to their government to operate transparently, and so we've made recommendations to improve the city's compliance with the Sunshine Law. Now that concludes my formal presentation of the audit and its results. Again, I want to thank the mayor, the alderwomen and the aldermen, and the staff, employees, and administration for their assistance in the audit process. As you heard in the presentation, there are many findings and recommendations. The responses, the city's responses to the audit are included within the audit report. In almost every instance, they agreed to take corrective action with our findings, and in some cases have already begun to take some action, to take steps towards improving their operations. And so I look forward to seeing this progress and monitoring this progress. And so with that, I would be happy to take any questions that you all might have about the audit that we're here today.
When there were instances like on the police station where there were not several bids.
Can't hear you.
Do
There's a
you mind
microphone.
going to the microphone, or I can rephrase the question?
No, worries, fine.
Okay, when there were instances where there were not several bids obtained for developer purposes, was the developer that got the bid in any way tied to any city official?
Honestly, we did not see direct evidence of that. But the police station, the items that we identified, can everybody hear me now? We did not see direct evidence of that, but I mean, frankly, we don't have the power as the state auditor to look into people's personal, we can only go with the documentation that is available, publicly. So we don't have the ability to dig into people's personal situations, finances, and the construction contract that was given out for the construction of the metal building. It was done through a bid. The items that we've included in here were a lot of the extra sundry items that were included. And frankly, the original bid that was given out on that building was far before the scope of our audit. So it was going back several years as far as documentation. But yeah, we did not find, or you would be reading that. But you have to keep in mind that it's difficult to sometimes prove situations like that because we don't have the ability as auditors to get into people's personal records, finances. We can't go look at their personal
And for
information.
clarification, there was only one bid received, is that correct?
I can't say off of the top of my head without going back and looking at the documentation.
Okay, and this is just a question for my own understanding. This moving funds from one to the other, does that resemble check kiting? Is it that type of thing where you appear to have money that you don't really have?
Well, so let me back up a little bit. I wouldn't say that it's check kiting, right? Because that's a kind of a specific type of fraud. What we're saying is that there's money sitting in these utility funds, and amounts are being transferred to the general fund to pay for things that are not allowed utility costs. And so when you're transferring money in between these funds, it makes it look like the general fund has a lot more money that it does to pay for road projects, to pay for the police station, to pay for other items that may not be allowable. Meanwhile, you have these utility funds over here, where the money is being taken from. So we could trace them, we could see the transfers, right? We could see the transfers from the utility fund to the general fund, and then what the general fund was paying for. It's not like a fraud where you can't really tell where the money is coming from, and then all of a sudden, poof, it's gone. Does that make sense?
Okay, but it does give the illusion of money that isn't actually there.
Within the general fund,
Okay,
right? So
and-
it makes it look like the general fund has more money available for general government business than it does. So that's accurate.
Then without the check and balance system as to where this money is going, the possibility of fraud exists in that utility money was indeed spent in places that it was not to be allocated for.
To be clear, we did not find fraud. You know,
Okay.
I just want to lay that out. We did not find theft of funds. We did not find, we did not see any criminal violations of law or something that touched upon that. So I do want to say that and make that clear. What we're talking about here is a lack of checks and balances, that money was spent, used for a purpose that it shouldn't be used for. You know, that's not necessarily criminal or theft. It's not used for what it's supposed to be used for. And a lack of proper purchasing and bidding to get the best value for your tax dollar.
And again, we don't really know, because of the time frame, if that purchasing is tied to any city official, correct?
Right, we did not find that. Through our audit work, we did not find that. If that was the case, again, as Todd said, that would be included in the audit report, definitely.
Is there a way, do we know exactly how much of the utility money has been spent inappropriately, and will it be paid back, or what is the process here?
Sure, so we know that, I mean, in just a course of 1 year, 2015, we know at least $1 million has been transferred. And so, you know, if you're using that, well, I'll let Todd follow up on this. Money has been transferred over time, and so it does add up. You know, what the city needs to do is look at their finances, keep the utility money in the utility funds, keep the general fund in the general fund, and figure out what general fund money is available for general purposes, government purposes. I know Todd wants to add to it.
And if you read the detail that we have included here, some transfer of utility monies to the general fund are appropriate.
Right.
If there are allowable costs that are paid by the general fund that relate to the utilities, the office workers that work in City Hall, well, they handle everything. They handle the utilities, they handle the general fund, they handle the streets, but their salaries are typically all paid out of the general fund. And then there's an allocation of costs, and other funds within the city also contribute to the general fund. It's not just the utilities. But the utilities, because they are the largest and have the most amount of assets, transfer the largest amount of money. I think if you get into the details that we have included here, our point is that there is some documentation and some support for the amounts that they transferred, but we looked at those specific calculations and found many of them to be questionable. Frankly, there's just really no basis for how did you arrive at this amount and what supports it? What's the reason to transfer $1 million? Some transfer would be appropriate. And then that's compounded by there's multiple transfers. So, you know, what are the reasons why we're moving so much utility money in the city of Harrisonville to the general fund? And the city just needs to be able to clearly support that information for the city. And that's what, so there's a lot of money that's being moved. Some of it is potentially okay, but the support needs to be approved.
Right.
Is it,
It is true that, you know, when, again, if it goes to utility-related expenses, so that clerk's time or salary that is going towards utility, that's a utility-related expense, not a road project.
right. Is it feasible to think that there's a possibility of the light or the water, the electricity going, the bills going down? Because there's actually more money there than what we had originally thought?
Right. So we didn't look at the level of utility rates, but of course, the city should look at their rates and the accumulation of assets after they figure out this transfer of money situation. And, you know, usually what you do is they do a rate study to determine the appropriate level of rates for, they need reserves, there might be projects that they need to, you know, utility development projects that they need to work on. And so accumulation of some funds or assets within these utility accounts are appropriate, right? But that is something that they should look at overall.
And
I want to
we-
give an opportunity for, if somebody else has a question.
Could we ask those asking questions state their name?
I guess we could. I mean, it's a public meeting.
Dorothy Young. I want to thank you for the information that you shared here this evening. My question deals with procedure. You have provided the audit, and you have provided the audit, and there are recommendations within it. The city board has had the opportunity to make comments regarding your recommendations. Some of those comments indicate that they will be taking action. Is there any oversight from your office to see that those actions are actually taken? Or is it up to the community and the citizens to monitor whether or not the board fulfills what it has said it's going to do?
Right. So because the city received a rating of poor, that means we will do a follow-up review. So we will give the city time to implement new policies, to implement recommendations, to take corrective action. And so we will be back later this year, do interviews, gather documentation again, and look to see if corrective action has been implemented. And then we provide that report to the public. So we will be following up.
Mrs. Galloway, I'd like to tell you, thank you for being here tonight. Todd, thank you for the audit. Aren't you the new mother?
I am a new mother. I have, he's almost 5 months.
I know. If any of you are wondering why we're a little late in getting the audit report, there it is. That's what the staff told me. Anyway, I agree with Ronald Reagan. Trust but verify. And this city has operated for too long on a good old boy nature. It's okay. To the answer to your question on how many millions we got out there, out of our utilities, just in two alone, the 291 project and the $1 million we're paying for Crown Center, we got $250,000 going to Sutherland's. That's not holding its own. My information that I've told the mayor and some of the council members is get the hell out of the utility business, because they're using it for a slush fund. And I know nobody wants to do that, but you can't be the third party in a distribution line and have a competitive rate. And then we hit them with a franchise fee, which we will. Then we hit them with what they call an administration fee, which is 7%. If we could get out of this thing, and I don't know how it happens, but as long as you leave that availability to any city council, you're talking about a piggy bank, and they're gonna go. And I don't care. I've been coming to City Hall since Mr. Mills was on the mayor. And it's always been the same thing. When I first called Todd and he asked my concerns, they're all answered on the first page, by the way. Thank you, Todd. The $1.5 million for the 291 project really upset me. When I walked into City Hall one day, some few years back, Mr. Moody and Keith Thomas were outside, 9 o'clock in the morning. We got the controller of the money, we got the mayor, or the city administrator. When I walked by, the only thing I heard Keith say is, "I will not do that again." I don't think he's talking about coffee. So he knew he shouldn't be moving the funds, but he did it anyway. And that, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot believe this budget for the city of Harrisonville, and y'all won't know this probably, is $41 million a year. We got a population of 10,000 people. That means for every man, woman, and child, you're paying $4,100 per person to live here. On a family of 4, that's $16,400. He's not paid rent, he's not bought groceries, he's not bought a car. And the median income for Harrisonville is $46,000 a family.
So, I mean, I understand that frustration. I feel that frustration too, right? Because we want your tax dollars to be used as efficiently and effectively as possible and to be used appropriately, right? I mean, it's the money coming out of your paycheck. I get that. And so that's, what this audit covers. And addresses concerns and many other concerns that we found during the audit process. And so we will be back to follow up on these things. I do want to allow, if there's questions
Sure.
in regard to the audit report, because we have some
Right, you
limited
got a lot of
time
people, but
in order to address the questions.
I just wanted the people to understand that the city of Harrisonville has a $41 million budget. Clinton, Missouri, the same size town, $8.5 million. Good night.
Good afternoon. I got it. Oops, sorry. I'll duck. My name is Brett Reese. A few things. One, if you could, you kind of mentioned this after Mr. Butler spoke, if you could really keep this to just questions, because it's a question and answer session, so we're not here all night, that'd be great. Because a lot of people are very passionate about this subject, and we're probably going to get a lot of speeches like the one we just got, and that's fine in any other capacity, but here it's a question and answer, and I think everybody wants to get our questions in and go home. Okay, so as my understanding is that the audit, you did the audit, and then there was a draft audit presented to the mayor and the board of aldermen, and then the city had the opportunity to rebut or answer, and then that was done, and then we're here tonight with the final draft of the audit. So, as you probably know, in 2015 there was quite a change in the leadership of Harrisonville, and before that there was a pretty contentious campaign. But really, what I'm getting at is there was a big change. So my question is, I'm assuming that a lot of this stuff, a lot of these findings happened before the change of leadership, and maybe some after, I don't know, because I didn't get a chance to read the whole thing. I got here 5 minutes before we started. My question is, the people that are, I don't have a better word, implicated, this happened, here was the problem. Some of those people were before April of 2015. And this audit covered 2015, is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. Were the people that were named or found to do anything wrong or whatever, were they contacted? The former mayor, the former finance director, the former city administrator, alderman? Well, I know I wasn't. I was an alderman for the first 4 months. Were those people contacted? And if not, did the city rebut any of these findings?
Sure. So let me answer that question a little bit generally, and then I'll leave it to Todd to speak a little bit. So, when we conduct an audit of a public entity or a public body, it's not an audit of the individuals, it's the audit of the city. The city of Harrisonville is the auditee, they're a public body, and whoever is responsible has that fiduciary responsibility, whether it be a mayor or city council person, or if there's changeover, ultimately, it's our audit of the city, not of the individuals within. And so there has been significant turnover within the city administration and the elected officials that represent the city. And so certainly some of these items did happen in the past. Moving forward, though, it is the responsibility of the new mayor and city council folks to fix the recommendations moving forward, right? They have that, in their elected roles, they have the fiduciary responsibility to do that. And so, that's part of holding public office, that's part of being a public official. And so whether it happened on their watch or not, they are now tasked with taking corrective action moving forward. Todd, do you want to add to that?
As far as the first part of that question, it's extremely rare, and no, we did not contact former officials. I've been working here a long time, I'm not going to rule it out of the question to do, but as Ms. Galloway indicated, we focus on the records that exist with the city, because that's who we're auditing, and we obtain the information that's available from the officials that are in place, from the city officials that we acquire with, and we did not reach out to speak with former officials. Now, had the circumstances been different, or had we found different things, it's possible on an audit that we might do that, but it's not typical. We focus on speaking with the officials that are in place at the time that we are conducting our work.
How much did the audit cost?
Cost?
Do we have a final?
Well, and
We
of
don't-
course,
I know-
final job costs will get ran at the end, we run them by the month, but right now the costs are right at about $70,000, and the original estimate of the audit was 40 to 60. We did notify the city during the course of the audit that we felt that there would be an increase in that cost based on the issues that we were finding, and that estimate was increased to 70, and that's approximately what our costs are going to come in at.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm right here, no former officials were contacted. The point person or people were the people that are now in charge of the city, who ran against those former people and used this audit in their campaign, insinuating that there would be fraud found. And they were the ones that you reached out to find out if these were true, and to find out any rebuttal, any clarifications.
Well, we reached out to the city to obtain documentation,
Right.
and we reviewed the meeting minutes
Right.
for any actions that would have occurred. I mean, some of these things in here, we went back as far as 2010, 2011 to review the minutes of meetings, which is the official documentation from the meetings. So I can't think of every single, I don't believe that we reached out to any of the significant former officials or former board members. But it's also, possible that one of them may have reached out to us. We put out announcements that, that we were coming to do an audit, and anyone had information that
Well,
wanted
I'm
to share.
talking about in a rebuttal kind of situation. You use
So,
the phrase,
sir-
why did this happen? Why did this happen? So maybe one of them reached out to you, but you didn't ask those questions of any of the former.
Sir,
And I know
we
it's
did
fine.
an
and I'll
audit,
sit-
again, let's focus on what's in the report. And so, what we found is based on our audit process, which is documentation obtained from the city. That might be minutes, that's walking through with city administrators, the city administrator, finance staff, clerks, et cetera, and the documentation that we have. And so, again, it's an audit of the city. It's the documentation that's available through the city. It is not an audit of individuals. And so, what went on here locally throughout the audit process is not something that, one, we can control or, be a part of. And so, tonight is the final report. Tonight is where we have, the final presentation of findings to give. What happened here locally is kind of outside of the audit process.
I don't
You-
really
you-
understand
using-
that last sentence, but I'll thank you
using-
and I'll sit down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I think you can hear me without the microphone.
Yes, sir.
My name's Morris Colbert, and I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to have an opinion from you if I could. Having worked in the field myself, when someone closes the books, can they render an opinion? In other words, the city hires a CPA firm to close the books every year and give a report, which in the past has been called an audit report. And to me, a financial report cannot be rendered by the people preparing the work.
And that is one of the findings that we had that we didn't cover in the general presentation, but we do have a finding in here related to the independent audit report and findings of the independent auditor, the CPA firm, which were not followed upon. So they did make recommendations, and those were not implemented. We found
Yeah, well,
that.
I noticed that was in there,
Right.
and I brought it up several times when I was on the board, and I was always put down.
Right. So, and I do want to point out that there is a difference between a financial statement audit that an independent CPA firm does and a performance audit that the state auditor's office does. And so I'll just talk about that just briefly. So a CPA firm, in an independent financial statement audit, what they're looking as the numbers on the page, the financial statement, are they presented accurately or not? And so you can get a clean opinion because the information provided in the financial statements is accurate, no matter what it says. If you're in the black or you're in the red, as long as it's presented correctly and with standards, then you can get a clean opinion.
But didn't they render?
They did provide, you're right, they did provide accurate information, but that's a financial statement audit, right? Okay, what we do in a performance audit is we look at financial information, but we also look at compliance with state law, like the Sunshine Law. We look at compliance with policies that are here locally, like the purchasing policy that the city has, that things need to go out to bid. We look for the transfer of dollars and utility funds and things like that, things that are covered here that may not be covered in a financial statement audit. So I just want to point out, because a lot of people say, the independent auditor came in with something, how did you find all this stuff? Well, our scope and objectives of our audits are different than financial statement audits.
But my understanding was, in Accounting 101, that whenever you did a financial report, you did a review of internal controls in conjunction with it. And apparently, looking at your report, the internal controls have been lacking.
We did find gaps in internal controls. And what you're referring to, for people in the audience, if they want to look at it, is finding 9.
Thank you.
That we're talking about. Thank you. We probably have time for, I think, maybe one other question.
Mine's going to be short.
Oh, okay, well then maybe 2.
Elaine Jackson. The question I have is what you put in here about the closed meetings. Would you give me some indication of how anyone in the public can keep track when closed meetings are used to hide discussion about something that is totally inappropriate? How do we track that? How do we find out? We all know it's happening.
That is actually a more difficult question to answer than you might have anticipated.
I'll sit down and listen.
So what we're talking about is compliance with the Sunshine Law. So the Sunshine Law outlines reasons that a public body can go into closed session. And you're only supposed to go into closed session for those specific reasons. And and sometimes only through an audit process do you really find out that what was discussed in the closed session maybe was not the reason that they gave. So the reason might be allowable under law, but was discussed was not allowed under law, and so that is very difficult. There are other times, the reason that they go into closed session, they'll say the reason, and it is not allowed under law. And therefore, it is very clear that they're going into closed session to discuss things that should not be discussed. So, we have findings in here, that's finding 8, for anybody that wants to look at it. And so, we have worked or spoken with the city council to make sure that they understand and to go over those certain portions. And that is certainly, I guarantee you, certainly something we will be following up on when we come and do our follow-up review.
You have time for one more?
Okay, one more.
My question is, on page 29, in the first paragraph, the auditor has repeatedly reported city personnel do not possess the ability or expertise to draft the year-end financial statements, and so forth and so on. Who does the hiring? Is there job descriptions, and those are not followed, or is there no job descriptions?
And the finding that was referred to here is, it's recommendations that are made by the independent auditors annually when they do their audit of the city. I really am not sure either. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what the basis for the recommendation by the private CPA was, but we felt like this had been reported multiple years in a row, and I think to the previous speaker's comment, if the CPA firm has to come in and do more than what the standards of accounting would allow you to do in order to prepare the final, numbers for the year-end financial statements, then it calls into question the independence in some instances of the audit firm, which my guess is they've continued to make this recommendation. They want the city to get personnel that are knowledgeable enough to prepare the comprehensive annual financial report, the CAFR, for the city. And I don't personally know how much assistance, they have to provide. We look at the independent financial report, but the answer to the question, I think, is with the city council, as far as do they have personnel that are capable of implementing the recommendation that has been made by the CPA firm. Our purpose of including this in our report is just to bring additional attention to the fact that something needs to be done to address this concern, because eventually it is going to affect the independence of the audit firm that does the work.
Who does the hiring? The city council surely doesn't hire every employee, do they?
I would generally believe that the department head, I'm sure for each department, it's not typically an area that we get into as part of our audit, but no, I'm certain that the city council's not interviewing the regular everyday workers for all the various city departments.
So, well, thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for attending here tonight. I do want to again say that if you're looking at the audit report and you have follow-up questions or things that you're curious about or want a better understanding, please contact my office. You can call, you can email, you can visit us on the web, and we will try to help you out. Again, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you.
Ma'am, whenever you originally came to us and presented this audit to us and explained everything to us, it put a huge burden on the administration